Welcome to Innovate Social, where we inspire leaders to pursue social change. My name is Johanna Di Juanco, Global Shapers Manila Hub's passionate advocate for inclusive progress and your host for today. Founded by the World Economic Forum, the Global Shapers community has over 8,000 members in 160 countries, where people under the age of 30 work together to address local, regional, and global issues. When we talk about gender inequality, we often forget that males too are subjected to gender roles and stereotypes. Oftentimes, males are pressured to act and behave in a certain way. Toxic masculinity refers to the notion that manliness, or the act of being manly, requires the assertion of masculine privilege through perpetual domination, the devaluation of the opposite sex, and wanton violence or aggression. These traditional masculine norms can be deeply ingrained in an individual, affecting their physiological state, which can thereby also result in harming others in society. Furthermore, the issue of toxic masculinity can even be more daunting and challenging when it is brought to the workplace. With the future of work characterized by rapid and large scale changes across industries, how can leaders identify toxic masculinity and in what ways can it be detoxified? In fact, does the future of work widen the gender parity gap and result in increased vulnerability for men, women, or both? And how does this affect workplace culture or career considerations for youth? Today, our special guest is a poet, essayist, and the former speechwriter for President Aquino, who also recently wrote about how toxic masculinity is prevalent in schools and how it can shape one's growth and development. Thanks for joining us, Gian.
Oh, glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So, our viewers are mostly individuals who are still finding their way. And so we often start off by asking you about your origin story. So tell us, Gian, what made you choose to be a writer? And assuming that you don't just write about anything, how did you choose the topics that you do write?
Um, well, I guess with writing, you realize that you're drawn to it, or you're maybe a little good at it, or you feel like you could be good at it. Then you get some validation, and then you keep doing it. Then eventually you realize, okay, this is fun. You get kind of absorbed in it. When you're doing it, you feel like you feel like you don't notice the time and all that. So I feel like that's why I'm in writing, and that's where I'm at right now. It used to be a little more or a little loftier, my reasons for doing what I do. But I guess you kind of realize how humble any pursuit is, like as the years go by. uh as people get older, I feel like they also try to simplify their reasons for doing things. Mine is just, I can feel immersed in it. And I they mentioned that, like, the state of flow. There's that idea of that being genuine joy or happiness, when you feel like, okay, I'm good at this, and I'm thinking of nothing else but this. So that's what writing is with me. For I mean, other people reach that state with, you know I guess, other pursuits, art, I don't know, business, uh, and but yeah, for me it's writing, poetry, essays.
Do you mind sharing what those lofty ambitions were? I'm rather curious by how you stated that.
Well, for some people that would be like writing poetry, or writing literature in the pursuit of of what David Foster Wallace calls like a capital T truth. There's some truth about the world or the universe, some insight, like really getting at something that has a little more depth to it, an understanding of people, society, the world. The idea of producing knowledge, of producing some sort of wisdom, that was always very attractive to me. And then you realize that, one day you realize that, oh wow, I'm actually a little capable of it. Because sometimes, in the production of art, you realize that you can transcend yourself, and all that, and you can offer something new to the world. It's really, maybe it was driven by some insecurities about your place in the world and how important you are. Then you realize eventually that, I guess, okay, I'm not that important. My observations aren't that unique, and I'm just here for whatever.
So it came to be kind of like you just kind of do what you enjoy. And in that sense, you're also contributing back.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like it used to be like, yeah, it used to appear to me as a shallow thing to do, to be like, just do what you like,
Mm,
just do. But obviously it's deeper than that. But at the core of it, there's nothing wrong, I guess, with finding yourself in that state where you're where you belong.
mm.
And when you're writing, it's just the whole world disappears. You don't always enjoy it. Actually, for the most part, I forget who said that. It was, I think, an older poet who said that she hates having written. No, no, she loves having written, but she hates writing, and that's mostly how it feels. It's nice when you're done with it. Maybe it's a little like working out. uh, you know, when you're working out, you don't really think of anything, but after working out, it feels so nice, fulfilling.
That's true. So then, one of your most recent opinion articles, right, that piqued our interest was one that was centered on the issue of institutionalized gender toxicity. And so now, if we look at it at a sociological perspective, we do understand that gender is different from the biological sex, in that it is a social construct, meaning the social and cultural norms are dictated by society. And so, if the idea of masculinity and the idea of femininity are social constructs, and it's different from the biological sex. Would you say that men can be feminine and that women can be masculine? And in that case, would women also be subjected to toxic masculinity?
Uh, yeah, yeah, definitely. Like short answer is yes, but I feel like when we talk about social construct, it sometimes leads us to a place where we might overestimate how moldable it is by single individuals or even single institutions. There are always like a lot of these factors that go into it, and schools are one of them. But definitely, say the media, parenting, generally how how we treat people who behave in particular ways, and it's not always like moldable in the large scale. So I guess this is why I still felt like when I wrote that article on toxic masculinity, which was published on ANCX, and this is about toxic masculinity in all boys schools. I still felt like those anecdotal voices needed to be heard. I interviewed individual students, school administrators, and a developmental psychologist. And it was, you can't really see it as research. It was more of a human interest article, but it was important because, but it was important in the sense that it's one out of the thousand articles we need on how toxic masculinity manifests in the world. I'm not an expert on, how it would manifest in a workplace, or how uh, it would, how females would kind of adopt it in their own ways. I'm sure there's a discussion to be had about that, where I've read stuff, people talking about how um the toxicity that a lot of men put out there is meant to be combated and not replicated, not perpetuated. Like the women, women in power shouldn't be seen as women perpetuating the toxicity of men, but as reforming it. But that's a discussion that I am really not equipped to really take on with any sort of depth. It's just an argument that I feel should be put out there. Yeah.
And so noting that, right, is there's no denying that gender and power are related. So how has society made us believe that there is a superior sex? And in what ways do educational institutes or other institutes reproduce these gender power relations?
It's what we reward. No parent really comes out and says that boys are better than girls, men are better than women. Even institutions are gonna claim to be gender equal, but how do we treat? I guess how do we treat certain behaviors? I guess that's how it manifests. Um, when we see an aspiration to dominate, do we reward that? Do we reward toxic male behavior? I think we do. I guess it's just really unpacking it. It's a matter of unpacking it and really calling these behaviors as such. No, that's toxic. That's not something that leaders, should aspire to. I feel like even among boys, we also reward, no, especially among boys, we reward those who aspire to dominate. But there are different kinds of people. I truly enjoy being in the company of those who aspire to harmonize, who, kind of act as the glue of the friend group. There are lots of people who are like that. Bring people together, and when people get into really intense discussions, they like processing it and having every voice heard. But that's not how traditional masculinity has grown in the country and in the world. It's really about who has the loudest voice, or who is the most, physically gifted, or whatever. But we're not rewarding that aspiration to harmony. We don't see it as manly. Obviously, we have to discuss whether the idea of something being manly or not is something that we should aspire to in the long term. I don't think we should, but and you know, some things are more malleable than others. So I feel like in the short term, we have to reassess, or we have to call out toxic behavior when we see it, and kind of reframe what being a man means, because it's a little difficult. It's a little more difficult to kind of really deconstruct, or to really do away with, gender norms, and to not see things in terms of that binary man and woman.
Right.
But in the meantime, while I'm alive, while I'm alive, there's some things that we can still fix.
Right. And that's perfect, because I mean, is there any way for an individual to actually identify it within themselves, if if I'm toxic, or and is there any way to escape from it, or if once that it's been ingrained by these institutions or by the people around you or these other social groups, can it not be removed anymore? you know
Yeah, on the individual level, you can definitely give that answer that yes, we just have to, try and be humble, and try to always look for feedback, and not react badly to it, because reacting like the problem is a lot of like toxic behavior uh is kind of like this. There's this always this constellation of toxic behavior within toxic people. Meaning, if you do something, if say, very typical things like say man spreading, or and people call you out on it, like, do you really have to sit that way? If you're a toxic person, you also have a toxic response to criticism. Your
Right.
ego is very fragile. So, when people call you out on something, or not even call you out, call you in, that
Right. Right.
they say that you should reframe that language. They call you in, bro, you shouldn't really do that because it's bad, or, it offends other people, or, it shows that you're not, a good member of society. And yeah, you usually have a toxic response to that as well. You kind of harden. And so I think, from my conversation with Dr. Danny Ochoa, God bless her, because I keep mentioning her whenever I have to talk about this, we might have to reconsider that antagonistic approach to people, because when they are already toxic, their response to criticism is to be even more toxic. So, if you not everyone has the energy to do this. There are lots of women, especially, who are dealing with trauma because of male toxicity, who are, just can't deal with the fragile male ego, which
Right.
is why my message, I think, for men is to, one, participate, because we're the ones who are, and it's still stressful dealing with toxic people, but men are the ones who have to deal with it a little less, and we have a little more bandwidth to call people out, to educate, to call people in. Sorry, I need to change that language, to call people in, and, as brothers, and to educate them. We just have more bandwidth. We have more emotional space to do it, because women are already dealing with so much. They're typically the victims of toxic male behavior, and we're also putting the burden on women to educate. Men. The thing is, you have this situation where men are like perpetuating this toxicity, and women call them out on it, and they're gonna be even more toxic to those women. So it's just really horrible, which is why men need to participate. Different kinds of men, different kind of genres of men. It's sad that they're genres of men, but we need people like poets, musicians, but we also need like really traditionally macho men like Terry Crews, right? And Dwayne Johnson, who different kinds of men who can say that no, dude, this is not okay.
And so there's a little different perspective, right? So in some cases, this toxic notion of masculinity is associated with homophobia. So
Mm.
then how does this definition of masculinity kind of affect how a queer person is treated?
Uh, Many ways, many ways. Definitely, I can kind of restrict my answer to what I experienced growing up. Obviously, when okay, according to Dr. Choas, again, it's been proven, I think, that all boys schools tend to intensify um, these gender norms. So, basically, boys trying to one up each other, saying that, no, I'm a man, or whatever. I remember a funny story. I think in grade six, we all wanted to be, men. We all wanted to go through puberty really quickly. And I was like, my skin was nice, and I'm blessed. My skin is still nice. Um, and they used to have those like blue, those blue oil papers where you collect oil on your face, and I was so annoyed that I couldn't fill it up. All my classmates were filling it up, and so that's like maybe a healthier kind of trying to one up each other into puberty, into being a man. And so I was so mad, and I'm still so mad that I can't fill it up.
It's a
It was
blessing.
so Yeah, it's not so fulfilling, but that's one way that it manifests. It intensifies that competition. So, and sometimes we do it in unhealthy ways because of what we see adults do. Um, we kind of brag about, wanting to have sex, or, how big our dicks are, and, like, how many girls like us, who's a heartthrob and everything. And we take it too far. We really take it too far. The way we joke about it, how we want to show ourselves as sexual beings. There was one time in class where a student, this was grade six, uh, one of them said that, this is in Christian life class. They said, I'm really excited to rape someone, and the teacher was just stunned, and someone just, I don't know what the audience is like for this show or this series, but it's, it's a good thing that someone really went and said gago, maniac, and it really, I don't know, I don't remember who said what, but I'm glad someone did,
Yeah.
because it showed that no, there's a line, and we tend to really near that line when we want acceptance from the group. So this goes back to your question, uh, where how does homophobia figure into that? Well, being homosexual uh, is also kind of related to exhibiting like feminine traits and all that. So that's when people are like pushing you down the pecking order. They say, you must be gay, you're weak. People really use it as a pejorative, and that's where the homophobia comes from. I don't want to be gay because I don't want to, be pushed down this social structure. I like being accepted by a group.
Right.
It's really group dynamics. I feel like that extends to the larger conversation of toxicity. It's people wanting to men also wanting to belong to a group. That's why they don't change, because if I change, then what will my new group be? If I get woke, will I be pushed out of my current groups, and where will I find friends? So that figures into it. That yearning to be accepted, to be part of the group, which I feel like still goes unexpressed in general society, women too. We all want to be part of a group. We all want to have that group of friends. We all want to be, have that friend group from How I Met Your Mother, or Friends, and all that. We love that. We prize that in our media, but we never get to say it out loud. We can talk about how we hate being single, or we're looking for love and all of that, but we never, say it. We never feel comfortable enough to say it out loud. Like, I want to be part of a really healthy friend group.
That's very true. Oh my god. Okay, and so if toxic masculinity, right, if we brought it to the workplace, can you maybe share with our viewers what that would look like? What kind of impact that would have on the business, if any, or in the workplace culture and in an individual?
Oh, um, hmm. Well, it's kind of difficult. I read that question about how it would manifest in the workplace, and especially with new ways of working now. Um, does that intensify this gap in gender parity and all that? I definitely think people are studying that. We need to wait for the larger data to speak more broadly about it. But what we can do today is to kind of have an eye out for when things are not fair, for when it's a little more difficult for women, say, when uh, when they take on the responsibility of taking care of the kids in the household, and they have to juggle that with a work from home setup. That's one way it manifests. So we have to keep asking. I think, especially in corporations here in the Philippines, people tend to be uncomfortable with voicing out their uh, concerns about their work setup, uh, in fear of retribution internally. And I'm like that too, but we need to be a little braver and work a little faster, because I do think this conversation more than ever is being brought to the forefront. Gender parity and women in the workplace, but I don't think we have the speed, the urgency, or the bravery
Mm,
to really get it done. I feel like that's one thing we can do in the short term before we find the broad impact of this pandemic on our way of working. We need to be braver. We need to be a little more audacious when we see that, okay, this is not fair. Then I should bring it up, or I should talk to them and make sure that they're coping well. Get their consent, obviously, then maybe bring it up with someone higher up, if you're in a position to do that. I understand not everyone is. I understand that some of us are really limited to maybe complaining on Twitter and all that. I think if you're in like a position of authority or seniority, you need to reach out and just make sure that everyone's okay. Make sure that they're going to be safe if they bring something up. um, that's one way of trying to fix it. I feel like the way it manifests, especially during this pandemic, might be, uh, in policy. This is more intersectional, I feel, than exclusively feminist. It's more of, are are we forcing people to go to work even during a pandemic for work that can be done at home?
mm,
Are we endangering the lives and the families of people? Are we endangering sisters and mothers of also men who go to work, who don't have to be there? I feel like, are we not innovating enough? Are we not including kind of important work from home policies? Or are we not considering them? So I feel like that all figures in to making, I guess, life better for women. Like, it's hard to talk about it without that lens of inequality, also income inequality as well,
mm,
because also a lot of these policies, I guess the way to trace it back to toxicity or toxic masculinity is to see how these policies are formulated.
mm.
We say no, they have to go to work because we need warm bodies on the ground. I feel like that exhibits a very male brand of stubbornness
Yeah.
that is sometimes perpetuated by women leaders as well.
Mm,
Because, and it's kind of, it's a it's a long discussion on whether or not you can blame them for it, because that's how they learn to climb
Mhm.
that corporate ladder. What do we reward in corporations as well? So it's a long conversation, but at the end of the day, we just need to act with more urgency. We need to reach out to those who don't necessarily have a voice, or those who feel like they don't have a voice, especially in fear of this passive aggressive retribution that people sometimes enact in I mean, I work in HR right now, or I work with a lot of HR people, and I think we're very careful about that. We want people to be able to voice out. I'm lucky to be working with leaders who know that they need to be open. Ear has to be on the ground, and to be humble enough to get feedback from customers, but also from employees.
What
Yeah.
if your boss themselves reinforce toxic masculinity? Is there anything that you can do about it? Right.
Um, Yeah, I think that depends on how much power you have, right? Because you can't divorce this conversation from financial stability. A lot of people are not in a position to do that or to risk that,
Mm.
but it's the same. Like for the same reason that men have to be more participative in this fight for equality, because they're usually or more typically not the victims, and they have more bandwidth, emotional bandwidth, sometimes financial bandwidth to do this, or to fight for equality. I feel like those in a position of privilege should reach out and look for opportunities to call this behavior out. When
Mm.
there's like a toxic boss, if you can call it out without risking your livelihood, you should do it. But that's not the case for a lot of people.
Mm.
So anytime someone asks me, like, say, to do something like this, I do it. That's a very simple way of doing it, and I know that's like patting myself on the back, but it's something that people should do. When you're asked to do it, just do it. If it's not something that you feel is gonna ruin your life, if it's easier for you than for other people, if there's that sense that that's a scenario for you,
Mm.
you should definitely call it out. I've met people who are like, no, I call it out every time I see it, and I'm like, oh, that's a good policy to have, especially since you're in power, or like you feel empowered to do it, and you feel like you're not risking your entire life. Obviously, you're going to be risking something, right? When you do something like that. But if you're not risking your entire life or your entire livelihood, then you should consider doing it.
Mm.
But yeah, I can't speak more broadly than that, or I can't speak. No, I mean I can't speak more specifically than that on how it should be done in the workplace.
Right.
But bravery, urgency, it goes back to that, circles around.
And I love how you kind of brought it to the pandemic. We kind of jumped a little bit, but yeah, we wanted to share how it was critical to consider the potential impact of technological change and the gender gap in the workplace, right? Because when we talk about the future of work, it refers to digitization, there and thereby also job destruction, creation, workforce composition, expansion, and even the nature of work in itself. And so, as you mentioned, the pandemic has accelerated that digitalization and the extension of the work into the home. And so, given that, how would the accelerating pace of technological change in the workplace with a domineering male culture affect the gender gap specifically? How would it affect the roles a man or a woman can play in the economy, politics, or even in society?
Okay. Um, Universal basic income, I feel, is a good conversation to be having. And not just a conversation to be having, it's a good program to be piloting in different places to see how it should work. Yeah, you can't talk about the future of work, I think, without realizing that uh, the pace at which we create new industries and new jobs is not as fast as the pace of, I guess, automation and all that. So a lot of the female suffering in the world is caused by it's an economic problem. So it's really difficult to talk about. Obviously we can talk about interventions that get more women in more financially rewarding jobs.
Mm.
But how do we do that in a world where those jobs are getting scarcer by the day? Just promoting, say, women in STEM, which is incredibly important, is not enough to ensure that we remain progressive when it comes to promoting women's rights and actually human rights in general. So I think we should be piloting, say, universal basic income programs
Mm.
or similar programs. I might have a blind spot for other programs. I'm really into how that might manifest, how, in a world where the productivity and the efficiency of these companies, of all the producers, are just going higher by the day, and how we're automating more more jobs, how it takes, maybe it used to take 20 people to make a car and now it just takes two people.
Right.
This is where we're headed, and the economic problems, I feel, you can't divorce it from these gender parity problems. A lot of these problems are economic. Say, what are problems of women? Before we passed the reproductive health bill,
Mm.
I think it was around 7 or 8 women would die every day because of birth complications, because they didn't get enough sufficient medical care. They might not be economically empowered or educationally empowered to make that decision. So it's an economic problem. So I feel like, if the inequality is rising, if big companies continue to automate and get, in the long term, richer, and people lose jobs, that's going to be a disaster for the economy. That's going to be a disaster for everyone. But I think more so for women. So I do think, and I just saw a tweet yesterday how 8 people in the world own more wealth than the bottom 50% of the world, and that has changed over the past 5 years. Now only 3 people own, yeah, right, own that amount of wealth. So I'm like, yeah, it's really hard to kind of talk about it without talking about economic reform, like significant economic reform. uh it's just a matter of how to do it. I think that's where the 99% become fragmented.
Right. And I like how you brought in jobs in the economy, because when we also talk about future of work and the workplace culture centered on either male privilege or even female privilege, right? How does that kind of impact the career plans and considerations the youths may have for themselves in the future?
Yeah, that's tough. It's like, what do you say to someone? Let's say you're like a guidance counselor, and a high school student, a girl comes up to you and says, I don't know what I want to do with my life. And you just want to tell her, me neither. I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know why I'm a guidance counselor. I don't know if there's a future in this. Um, this is why I think it's always gonna be uh, it's always gonna be smart to teach people how to think, how to consume what the next hot, you know, uh, article or next hot trend in the academe, or what is like the Harvard Business Review publishing about the future of work, or whatever. What is the World Economic Forum saying about it? Shout out. And um, uh, it's so hard. It's so hard to be prescriptive about it. Uh, there was a time when we thought being prescriptive was helpful. Be a nurse, very very Filipino. Nursing is doing better. But the thing is, I didn't know I'd be in the industry that I'm in. I just kept writing, and an opportunity fell on my lap to write for the president, and I said, okay, I'll do that. It seems like an okay thing to do, and I did that for a while. Then I got into content creation, public affairs consulting, which doesn't really mean anything when you say it like that. Consulting for what? Then now I'm doing, I guess, communications, vaccine communications for hospitals. I have no idea where I'm headed, but I was lucky enough to be educated on how to think. I
Mm.
feel like, if poetry comes into this at all, or writing comes into this at all, writing is actually a practice on how to think, on how to perceive things,
Mm.
and how to kind of spin it with your perspective. And I think that's a really good, it teaches you how to improvise, or how to, find the thread, or find this logic, like thread of logic or emotion within a work or within a story. I feel like that's how writing would teach you to be in the world, or to how to function in the world. You notice these trends in society, or in your wider community, and uh you jump onto them. It's like, oh, okay, people are making a living now by creating content, by being social media managers. Oh my god, TikTok is a thing, I need to learn that. It's that nimbleness. That's what we need to teach kids. The question is how to do it. I mean, I'm
Right.
not an educator. I'm sure, some educator might be watching and might say that, okay, this guy might be on the right track, but he has no idea how difficult this is. And they're right. I have no idea how difficult what I'm prescribing is. But that's what's helped me, and I'm sure you feel that way too, Johanna.
Right.
Like, you're just on shifting ground. We have to get used to that.
Yeah.
We're always gonna be like, on the tightrope, so to speak.
That's right. And so I'm nearing my last question for
Mhm.
today. So when people often say that awareness and education is a vital step to change, and so would you think that awareness on this issue would be a good start in getting people to change their perspectives on the implications of gender norms? And what are some actions males can take to be more supportive of both men and women in the workplace? What more can be done, and who needs to get involved?
Um, a lot of people. Okay, you're talking about. Okay, we're back to toxic masculinity, and I truly apologize for all the
No,
tangents
it was
and
good.
and all of that. What can we do? I defer to the experts. Dr. Ochoa mentioned that men are more likely to be allies when they feel like what they do can make an impact, can change, which is why it's important to start small. If you can help one or two people in your immediate community, if you're in a position of privilege, and you are, being a man, it's not all equal degrees of privilege, but if you're a man, you're in some form of privilege. You need to wield that privilege to help one or two people, because when you realize that you can help, when you realize that you can influence people about this, you become more likely to keep doing it. And the second is to give people a community. People are afraid to change. When you change, when you're the woke one, uh, it's kind of difficult. You might get alienated from your basketball barkada and all that. And uh, communities also have to be welcoming of men who are happy to be allies. I know that there is some trauma involved, there is some suspicion, and I think it's I think it's just right that people are trying to take care of themselves, that women are trying to take care of themselves as well. But we need to give men who want to be better also a community, and that also falls on men. That falls more on men. Like, you need better groups of friends, people who really reward behavior that's non-toxic, that's still also very traditionally manly. I wrote something in my article, actually, how, what does manhood look like when you take out the toxic elements from it. You can still like basketball, you can still like, I don't know, wrestling, you can still like MMA. It's still very rich. It's not an attack on like male culture when you try to be a better person. It's just a matter of giving men a community, and when that will accept them if they try to be better, try to be woke. Lastly, uh when you try to say, try to be the woke one, or you try to talk to your friends about it, don't give up after the first conversation, because people are going to resist. It's not You're not going to win people over after one conversation. With my group of friends, and I love them all, they're very friendly and they love me too. We don't agree on everything. There are some things that I feel like, are still very toxic in the way I behave, in the way we behave as a group, and we talk about it. and it's not always like a pretty conversation. But now they joke that, oh no, magagalit si Gian or si Rob, because it's not like the wokest thing, and I'm like, and you just have to embrace it. Eventually the balance shifts. They're not gonna completely agree with you, but they're also gonna accommodate you as well. I feel like a lot of the fear that men have, like being alienated by their group, it comes from not feeling like you're loved enough by your group, not feeling like they would accept you if you kind of exhibit these traits that you want to be better and all that. So that's another thing, being more in touch with what we need from our friends, being able to say I'm lonely, I want the group. That's another part of it. But you know, we can talk like all day about this, but at the end of the day, it's really just try to help one person, then go from there. Try to help, one woman dealing with a toxic culture, then go from there because it goes a long way, and it's the right thing to do, and it also feels good. It feels good to feel like finally you're on the right track, and that you're shedding a lot of the wrong things that you learned. It's a lot, it feels really good, very rewarding.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much, Gian, and everyone listening for tuning in. So today we learned about the prevalence of gender issues and how it's reproduced through societal systems, along with the rapid pace of change in the nature of work and how it is done. We realize the severe repercussions it can have on an individual's well-being, career path, and an extension their futures. But this doesn't mean all hope is lost. With Gian's advice and his personal anecdotes, he shared today how we should be able to focus on being able to do one small thing at a time, one step at a time, and hopefully be able to help one person make that impact by being consistent and to keep things going. And so if you're interested in staying updated with Gian, feel free to follow them at gian.lao on Facebook and Instagram. We also have a survey where you can choose what topic we should focus on next. So do check it out on our Facebook page or our Instagram bio on Global Shapers Manila. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe wherever you're tuning in. Thank you so much and stay safe, everyone.